The crack of Jesse Corbin's Colt .45 split the humid Tennessee air like thunder, and Mordecai Flint dropped to his knees, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped through his fancy Eastern suit. The auction stage fell silent, except for Maybelle. Rosewood's sharp intake of breath as she stood frozen in her tattered cotton dress. The auctioneer's gavel halfway to his block. "Bidding's closed," Jesse announced, smoke curling from his barrel as he stepped through the crowd of stunned onlookers. His badge caught the afternoon sun, but his steel-gray eyes never left Flint's twisted face. "Miss Rosewood ain't for sale?" The crowd murmured and shifted, but nobody moved to help the wounded man. Flint had made too many enemies in Copper Creek, buying up farms from desperate families and turning honest folk into sharecroppers on their own land. Now he'd crossed the line, trying to purchase Maybelle's family's homestead along with her hand in marriage to settle her father's gambling debts. "You can't stop a legal transaction, Corbin," Flint snarled, struggling to his feet. "I won that bid fair and square. The girl comes with the property." Jesse's jaw tightened. He'd known Maybelle since they were children, had watched her grow. From a wild-haired tomboy climbing apple trees into the most beautiful woman in 3 counties. Her father, Beauregard Rosewood, had gambled away everything they owned in a poker game last month, and by Tennessee law, his unmarried daughter was considered part of his assets. "The law says a lot of things," Jesse replied, his voice low and dangerous. "But justice says something different." Maybelle found her voice then, stepping forward despite the auctioneer's protests. "Jesse, you can't. My father's debts died with him." Jesse cut her off gently. "He put a bullet in his head rather than watch you get sold off. That makes this whole auction illegal." The lie rolled off his tongue smooth as honey. Beauregard Rosewood was passed out drunk in the jail cell, sleeping off another bender, but Jesse needed time to think of a real solution. The crowd began to disperse, sensing the danger in the air. Flint's men 3 hired guns from Memphis fingered their weapons but didn't draw. "Not yet." "You're bluffing, Lawman," Flint said, applying pressure to his wound. "Oh, you guys." "Even if the old fool is dead, the debts transfer to his next of kin. I'll have my property one way or another." Maybelle's green eyes flashed with a fire that reminded Jesse why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. "I'm not property, Mordecai Flint. Not yours, not anybody's." "We'll see about that," Flint sneered, signaling his men as he backed toward his carriage. "This isn't over, Corbin. Own half this town already, and I'll own the other half before Christmas, including your little girlfriend." As Flint's carriage disappeared in a cloud of dust, Jesse holstered his gun and turned to face Maybelle. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins during the commotion, framing her face like flames. For a moment, they just stared at each other, years of unspoken feelings hanging heavy in the air between them. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for me?" Jesse touched his hat brim, suddenly unsure of himself. "Because some things are worth fighting for, Maybelle. Some things are worth dying for." But as he watched her walk away toward the Rosewood farm, Jesse knew the real fight was just beginning. 3 days later, Jesse found Maybelle behind the general store, her sleeves rolled up as she scrubbed laundry in a wooden tub. The sight of her hands, raw and red from the lye soap, made his chest tighten with guilt. She should be wearing silk gloves and sitting in a parlor, not working like a field hand to pay off her father's mistakes. "Heard you took a job with Widow Pritchett," he said, settling on an overturned crate beside her. Ow. News travels fast in Copper Creek. Maybelle didn't look up from her washing. "Need the money?" "Flint may not have gotten me at auction, but Daddy's debts are still real as rain." "How much does he owe?" $800. She finally met his eyes, and Jesse saw the exhaustion there. "Might as well be $8,000 for all the hope I have of paying it." Jesse pulled a leather pouch from his vest and set it on the edge of the tub. The coins inside clinked softly. "Take it." Maybelle stared at the pouch like it might bite her. "Where did you get $800, Jesse Corbin? You make $20 a month keeping peace in this town? Been saving for years? Had plans?" He trailed off, remembering the engagement ring hidden in his sock drawer. "Well, doesn't matter now what I had planned." She pushed the pouch back, toward him, her jaw set stubborn as her father's mule. "I won't be bought by you any more than I'd be bought by Flint. It ain't buying, it's what, Charity? Her green eyes sparked. I've got pride left, Jesse, even if I don't have much else. Before he could argue, the sound of approaching horses echoed from Main Street. Jesse stood, his hand instinctively moving to his gun as he recognized Flint's voice barking orders. Through the gap between buildings, they could see the land baron directing his men to nail notices to fence posts and storefront windows. "What's he doing, Maybelle?" whispered. Jesse snatched one of the notices as Flint's crew moved on. His face darkened as he read. "Foreclosure papers. He's calling in every debt in town. Anyone who owes him money has 1 week to pay in full or lose their property. But that's half the families in Copper Creek." "Exactly." Jesse crumpled the paper in his fist. "He's planning to own the whole town. Make everyone his tenant farmers." Maybelle sank back onto her washstool, the fight going out of her. Including me. Daddy owes him more than just the 800. There's interest and penalties for missing payments. ... How much more? 1,500 total. Maybe more by now. She laughed bitterly, all because Daddy thought he could draw to an inside. Straight. Jesse's mind raced. His savings wouldn't cover that much, and even if they could, Flint would just find another way to pressure her. Men like Mordecai Flint didn't give up easy, especially not when they'd been embarrassed in front of the whole town. "There's another way," he said slowly. "What do you mean?" Jesse knelt beside her, taking her soap-rough hands in his. "Marry me, Maybelle, tonight. By Tennessee law, a woman's debts transferred to her husband when she marries. I'll take on your father's obligations, legal-like." She jerked her hands away. "So I'd be trading one owner for another." "Wouldn't be like that," he said urgently. "You know it wouldn't. Loved you since we were children. This would just make it official. And when you can't pay either. When Flint comes for your badge and your savings and everything you own, what then, Jesse?" He stood, his jaw set with determination. "Then I guess I'll have to make sure Mordecai Flint doesn't collect on any more debts in Copper Creek." He said it made Mabel's blood run cold. She'd seen that look in his eyes before, right before he shot Flint at the auction. It was the look of a man who'd made his peace with violence. "Hey, Jesse. No. Whatever you're thinking." But he was already walking away, the spurs jingling against the dirt road as thunder rumbled in the distance. The Copper Creek saloon buzzed with nervous energy as Jesse pushed through the batwing doors that evening. Word had spread about Flint's foreclosure notices, and half the men in town nursed their drinks with the desperate intensity of those who had nowhere else to go. The air reeked of tobacco smoke, stale beer, and fear. Jesse spotted his target at a corner table. Virgil Kane, a grizzled cattle rustler who'd been running stolen livestock through the territory for years. Jesse had been building a case against him, but now he needed information more than justice. "Buy you a drink, Virgil?" Kane looked up from his cards with bloodshot eyes. "Lawmen buying drinks for outlaws? Must be the end times." "Might be," Jesse said, signaling the bartender. "For some of us, anyway." 2 whiskeys appeared on the scarred wooden table. Jesse didn't touch his, but Kane drained his in one swallow. "What do you want, Corbin?" "Information about Mordecai Flint, his business dealings, the kind that don't make it into the town records?" Kane laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You planning to arrest him for being a bastard? That ain't against the law. Last I checked. Maybe not. But I'm betting he's broken a few laws along the way to building his empire." Jesse leaned forward. "I know you've done work for him, Virgil, moving cattle that weren't quite legally his. Intimidating folks who wouldn't sell their land. You got no proof of that. Don't need proof. Just need to know where he keeps his records. His real books, not the ones he shows the bank." Kane poured another whiskey from Jesse's bottle. "What's in it for me? I'd stop looking so hard at those. Missing cattle from the Morrison Ranch. Maybe I even forget I saw you driving a dozen head toward the river crossing last week." For a long moment, Kane studied Jesse's face. Then he leaned back in his chair. He's got a safe in his study. Hidden behind a painting of some fancy English lord. Combination is his daughter's birthday, May 17th, 23. Jesse blinked. "Flint has a daughter. Had a little girl named Cordelia. Died of scarlet fever 3 years back. He ain't been right since." Kane's expression softened slightly. That's when he started buying up every farm and business he could get his hands on. Like he was trying to own something permanent, something that couldn't be taken away. The information hit Jesse harder than he'd expected. He'd always seen Flint as pure evil, but grief could twist a man in terrible ways. It didn't excuse what he was doing to Maybelle and the other families in Copper Creek, but it explained it. There's more, Kane continued. Keeps a ledger of every dirty deal he's ever made. Names, dates, amounts, insurance, in case anyone tries to cross him. Where? Same safe. But Corbin. Kane grabbed Jesse's wrist as he started to rise. You break into that house, you better be prepared to finish what you start. Flint's got guards, and they shoot first and ask questions later. Jesse nodded and stood, leaving money on the table for the whiskey. As he headed for the door, he nearly collided with Maybelle rushing in from the street. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes wild with panic. Jesse, thank God. You have to come quick, it's Daddy. He's gone. Gone. What do you mean gone? I went to bring him supper at the jail, but Deputy Hutchins said you released him this morning. But he never came home, and his things are still in his cell. And she was talking too fast, the words tumbling over each other. Jesse felt ice form in his stomach. He hadn't released Beauregard Rosewood. The man should still be sleeping off his latest drunk in cell number 2. Hutchins told you I released him. Yes, around 10 o'clock. Said you needed the space for more serious criminals. Her voice cracked. Jesse, where is he? Before Jesse could answer, the saloon doors crashed open and Deputy Hutchins stumbled in, his shirt torn and bloody. Sheriff, you gotta come quick. Found Beauregard Rosewood down by Miller's Creek. Alive. Jesse demanded. Hutchins' grim expression was answer enough. Shot twice in the back. Been dead for hours. Maybelle let out a sound like a wounded animal and would have collapsed if Jesse hadn't caught her. As he held her trembling form against his chest, one thought hammered through his mind. Mordecai Flint had just escalated this war. And innocent blood had been spilled. Now it was personal. The funeral for Beauregard Rosewood was a sparse affair. Only a dozen townspeople gathered around. The pine coffin in Copper Creek's small cemetery, their heads bowed more from fear than respect. Reverend Hawthorne spoke brief words about forgiveness and eternal rest. But his hands shook as he held the scripture, and his eyes kept darting toward the tree line where Flint's men watched from horseback. Maybelle stood beside the grave like a statue carved from ivory, her black dress borrowed from Widow Pritchett, and her face empty of tears. Jesse had never seen anyone look so alone, not even when his own mother died of consumption 5 years back. We should go, he murmured, touching her elbow as the last mourner drifted away. Flint's men have been watching all morning. She nodded, but didn't move, staring down at the fresh earth. He wasn't a good father, Jesse, but he was all I had. You've got me, do I? She finally looked at him, and her green eyes were like winter frost. Because it seems to me that everyone who gets close to me ends up dead or in danger. Maybelle, no? She stepped back from his reaching hand. Daddy died because of his debts. No. If I marry you, like you suggested. How long before? Flint decides you're in his way permanently? Jesse's jaw tightened. Let me worry about Flint, like you worried about Daddy? The words came out sharper than she'd intended, and she immediately regretted them. But it was too late to call them back. Jesse's face went carefully blank, the way it did when he was trying not to show pain. I didn't know Flint would go that far. But you should have. Her voice was steady now, cold as mountain stone. Been Lawman here for 3 years, Jesse. You know what kind of man he is. You know what he's capable of. She was right, and they both knew it. Jesse had underestimated Flint's ruthlessness, and Beauregard had paid the price. The guilt sat in his stomach like a lead weight. What do you want me to do? He asked quietly. Turn in my badge. Let him run roughshod over the whole county. Want you to be smart about this? Maybelle's composure cracked slightly. Want you to think with your head instead of your heart for once in your stubborn life. My heart's telling me to marry you and keep you safe. My head's telling me the same thing. And what's your gut telling you? Jesse was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then, that Mordecai Flint needs to be stopped, one way or another. Legal or not. Maybelle closed her eyes. That's what I was afraid you'd say. They walked back to Wardtown in tense silence. But as they reached the outskirts, the sound of shouting drew their attention to Main Street. A crowd had gathered outside the bank. Jesse could see banker Caldwell waving his arms frantically at someone inside a fancy carriage. "What's happening?" Maybelle asked. Jesse didn't answer, but his hand moved to his gun as they approached. Through the carriage window, he could see Flint's pale face and cold smile. The man's arm was still in a sling from Jesse's bullet, but he looked pleased about something. "Can't foreclose on the bank itself," Caldwell was saying. "This is illegal, immoral. Nothing illegal about calling in legitimate loans," Flint replied smoothly. "You've missed 3 monthly payments on your business loan, Caldwell. The full amount is due immediately, or the bank becomes my property." Jesse pushed through the crowd. "How much does he owe?" Flint's smile widened. "Ah, Sheriff Corbin, how refreshing to see you at another financial transaction. Mr. Caldwell owes me $12,000. The crowd gasped. 12,000 was more money than most of them would see in a lifetime. Caldwell's face went white as fresh cotton. "But if he can't pay," Flint continued, "I'm prepared to offer the citizens of Copper Creek a generous alternative. I'll absorb Mr. Caldwell's debt in exchange for one simple thing." "What?" Jesse demanded, though he suspected he already knew. Flint's eyes found Maybelle in the crowd, Miss Rosewood's hand in marriage, along with all debts and properties associated. With the Rosewood name, of course. The silence that followed was broken only by the creak of leather and the snort of horses. Every eye in the crowd turned to look at Maybelle, who stood frozen beside Jesse like a deer facing a hunter's rifle. "Well, my dear," Flint called out, "what's it to be? Your hand in marriage, or the economic ruin of every family in Copper Creek?" Jesse's hand tightened on his gun, but before he could draw, Maybelle stepped forward. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow." "At noon," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the street. "Meet me at the church." Flint nodded graciously. "Very well. Till tomorrow, then." As his carriage rolled away, Jesse grabbed Maybelle's arm. "What are you doing?" She looked at him with eyes that held secrets. "Buying us time? For what?" "For you to remember that sometimes the only way to stop a snake is to cut off its head." That night, Jesse sat in his office, cleaning his guns while thunder rolled across the Tennessee hills. Rain drummed against the windows, and lightning illuminated the empty street in stark flashes of white. He'd sent Deputy Hutchins home hours ago, a point in both of them losing sleep over what needed to be done. The door opened with a creak, and Maybelle stepped inside, her cloak dripping rainwater onto the wooden floor. She looked like a ghost. In the lamplight, pale and ethereal, her red hair darkened to auburn by the storm. "Shouldn't be out in weather like this," Jesse said, not looking up from his Colt. "Neither should you be sitting here planning murder." That made him raise his eyes. "You said anything about murder?" "I know that look, Jesse Corbin. Same look you had right before you shot Flint at the auction. Same look Daddy used to get when the whiskey made him mean." She sat down across from his desk, folding her hands in her lap. "We're going to kill him tonight." Jesse set down his gun carefully. "He killed your father. He's holding the whole town hostage. What would you have me do? Be the lawman I fell in love with, not the vigilante you're becoming." Her words hit harder than any bullet. Jesse leaned back in his chair, studying her face in the flickering light. "When did you fall in love with?" "Me? You really want to know?" A sad smile touched her lips. "Summer of 1871. You were 16, I was 14. Billy Crawford and his friends were tormenting that stray dog behind Murphy's store, throwing rocks at it for sport. You told them to stop, and when they wouldn't, you fought all 3 of them." Jesse remembered. He'd gone home with a black eye and split lip, but the dog had lived. "You never said anything. Neither did you. For 8 long years, neither of us said anything." She leaned forward. "Don't you think it's time we stopped being afraid?" "I'm not afraid of Flint." "I'm not talking about Flint." Her green eyes searched his face. "I'm talking about us. About what happens after. Even if you kill him tonight, there will be consequences. His men, his business partners, the territorial marshal, they won't just let his death go unanswered." Jesse stood and walked to the window, watching the rain cascade down the glass. "Maybe, but at least you'll be free." "Free to do what? Bury another man I love? 'Cause that's what this is leading to, Jesse. You kill Flint, and you become an outlaw. They'll hunt you down like a rabid dog. Then what do you suggest? He turned back to face her. Because come noon tomorrow, you're either going to marry that bastard or watch him destroy every family in this town. Maybelle stood and moved too. The gun rack on the wall, her fingers tracing the barrel of Jesse's Winchester rifle. There is another way. I'm listening. We rob him. Jesse blinked. What? Virgil Kane told you about the safe, didn't he? About the ledger with all of Flint's dirty business? Eyes gleamed with something dangerous. You break into his house. Tonight, steal his money and his records, and use them to destroy him legally. Maybelle, that's crazy? Dangerous? It's probably going to get us both killed? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yes, I know, but it's better than cold-blooded murder. Jesse considered the plan. Admirative if they could get there. Hands on Flint's ledger. They might have enough evidence to bring in the territorial marshal and have him arrested for his crimes. But the risks? His house is guarded, he said finally. At least 4 men. Maybe more. It's also isolated. Half a mile from the nearest neighbor. For quiet, we can get in and out without anyone knowing. And if we're not quiet, Maybelle picked up his Colt from the desk, checking the cylinder with practiced ease. Then I guess you'll get your war after all. Jesse stared at her in amazement. Where did you learn to handle a gun like that? Same place I learned to ride and hunt and fight from necessity. She holstered the weapon in her belt. Daddy wasn't always drunk, Jesse. Before Mama died, he taught me things. Useful things. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating Main Street in stark detail. For a moment, Jesse could see their reflection in the window, 2 figures silhouetted against the storm, preparing to steal into the night like common thieves. You sure about this? He asked. Maybelle moved to the door, her hand on the latch. I'm sure about you, Jesse Corbin. That's enough. As they stepped out into the driving rain, Jesse realized that whether they succeeded or failed tonight, nothing would ever be the same. They were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, committing themselves to a path that led either to freedom or to the grave. But as he watched Maybelle disappear into the storm, her cloak billowing behind her like dark wings, he knew he'd follow her anywhere. Flint's mansion squatted on the hill like a wounded beast, its windows glowing yellow against the storm-dark sky. Jesse and Maybelle crouched behind the stable, rain plastering their clothes to their skin as they studied the house's defenses. 2 guards walked the perimeter with lanterns, their rifles gleaming wetly in the light. Kitchen door, Maybelle whispered, pointing to the back of the house. Cook leaves it unlocked for the milk delivery. I know because I used to work here before Daddy's gambling got bad. What about the guards? They're lazy. Make their rounds every 20 minutes, then stand under the front porch to smoke and complain about the weather. She checked Jesse's pocket watch. Next patrol in 5 minutes. Jesse studied her face in the darkness. She looked different, somehow harder, more focused, like a different woman than the one who'd been washing laundry behind the general store just days ago. You don't have to do this, Maybelle. I can go alone. Try to leave me behind and I'll scream loud enough to wake half the county. Her green eyes flashed with determination. We're in this together now. The guards completed their circuit and disappeared around the front of the house. Jesse and Maybelle broke from cover, racing across the muddy yard to the kitchen door. The latch lifted easily under Jesse's hand, and they slipped inside the darkened house. The kitchen smelled of cold grease and yesterday's bread. They moved carefully between the heavy wooden tables and cast-iron stoves, their wet boots squelching softly on the stone floor. A narrow hallway led toward the front of the house, where Flint's study waited with its hidden safe. Second door on the right, Maybelle breathed in his ear. They crept down the hallway, past oil paintings of stern-faced men and delicate landscapes. That probably cost more than most people made in a year. The study door stood slightly ajar, revealing a slice of book-lined walls and a massive oak desk. Jesse eased the door open and stepped inside. The room reeked of cigars and leather, with undertones of something medicinal that made his nose wrinkle. Lamplight from the hallway fell across a portrait of a young girl with golden curls and sad eyes, Cordelia, Flint's dead daughter. Behind the painting, Maybelle whispered, pointing to a larger portrait of a British nobleman in military dress. Jesse lifted the heavy frame, revealing a steel safe built into the wall. The combination dial gleamed in the dim light. He spun it to the numbers Virgil Kane had given him, Mo 51723, and held his breath as the tumblers clicked into place. The safe door swung open with a soft creak. Inside were stacks of bills, legal documents, and a leather-bound ledger that looked like it contained half the sins of creation. Jessie grabbed the money and ledger while Maybelle rifled through the papers. Bills of sale, she whispered. Forged deeds. Loan agreements with impossible interest rates. Jessie, this is enough to hang him. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. They both froze, listening to the sound of slow footsteps approaching the study. Jessie drew his gun and motioned for Maybelle to get behind the desk. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I know you're in there. Flint's voice was calm, almost conversational. The kitchen door was still dripping rainwater onto Mrs. Henderson's clean floors. Jessie cursed silently. They'd been careless, leaving a trail even a child could follow. Come out now and we can discuss this like civilized people, Flint continued. Or I can have my men burn the house down with you inside. Your choice? How many men? Jessie called out, still hoping they might fight their way clear. Enough. The door creaked as Flint pushed it fully open. He stood silhouetted in the hallway, his left arm still in its sling, but his right hand steady on a nickel-plated revolver. Put your weapons on the desk, Sheriff. Both of you. Jessie hesitated, calculating angles and distances. But Flint wasn't alone. Two more men appeared behind him, their rifles trained on the study. Ledger too, Flint said as Jessie laid his Colt on the desktop. And the money, all of it. Maybelle emerged from behind the desk, her hands empty, but her eyes blazing with fury. You killed my father, you bastard. Your father killed himself the moment he sat down at my poker table with money he didn't have. Flint stepped into the study, keeping his gun trained on Jessie. I simply collected what was owed, by murdering him, by protecting my investment. Beauregard was planning to run, skip town and leave his debts behind. Flint's cold smile widened. I couldn't allow that. Bad for business. Jessie's hand inched toward the letter opener on Flint's desk. So you had him shot. I had him stopped. The fact that he resisted is regrettable, but not unexpected. Flint noticed Jessie's movement and shook his head. I wouldn't, Sheriff. You're already in enough trouble for breaking into my home. Add murder to your list of crimes. Murder. Jessie almost laughed. That's rich, coming from you. I'm a businessman, Mr. Corbin. Everything I do is legal, properly documented, and above board. Flint gestured toward the ledger on the desk. That book contains nothing but legitimate business transactions. You'll find no evidence of wrongdoing, because there is none. Maybelle stared at him in disbelief. Can't be serious. Oh, but I am. Every loan, every foreclosure, every land acquisition, all perfectly legal under territorial law. His smile turned predatory. The only criminals in this room are the two people who broke into my house to commit theft. Jessie felt the trap closing. Around them like a steel jaw, Flint was right, they were the ones who'd broken the law tonight. Whatever crimes he'd committed, he'd been careful to stay within the bounds of legal technicality. However, Flint continued, I'm prepared to be magnanimous. Miss Rosewood, if you agree to honor our arrangement marriage tomorrow at noon, I'll forget this unfortunate incident ever occurred, and if I refuse, then Sheriff Corbin hangs for burglary, attempted theft, and assaulting an officer of the territorial government, and you, my dear, will face the same charges as his accomplice. The room fell silent, except for the drumming of rain against the windows. Jessie met Maybelle's eyes across the desk, seeing his own despair reflected there. They'd gambled everything and lost. But then Maybelle smiled a cold, dangerous expression that made the hair on Jessie's neck stand up. There's just one problem with your offer, Mr. Flint, she said sweetly. What's that? You're assuming we came? Here alone. The explosion that shattered Flint's front windows came from Deputy Hutchins' dynamite, stolen from the mining office and carefully placed against the mansion's foundation. The blast threw everyone in the study to the floor as dust and debris rained from the ceiling. Jessie rolled behind the desk as Flint's men scrambled to their feet, confused and disoriented. In the chaos, Maybelle snatched the ledger and money. while Jesse retrieved his gun from where it had scattered across the floor. "This way," Maybelle shouted, heading for the study's tall windows that faced the backyard. Jesse put 3 quick shots through the glass, clearing the frame, then helped Maybelle climb through. They dropped into the mud just as Hutchins appeared around the corner of the house, leading to saddled horses. "About time you got here," Jesse called out, boosting Maybelle into the saddle. "Sorry, Sheriff. Had to convince Reverend Hawthorne to help. Took some doing." Hutchins mounted his own horse as shouts erupted from inside the damaged mansion. "Ministers waiting at the church with the marriage papers already?" "Marriage papers?" Maybelle looked confused as they spurred their horses toward the road. "Couldn't let Flint marry you legal tomorrow," Jesse explained, leaning low over his horse's neck as bullets whined past them. "But if you're already married to someone else..." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Jesse Corbin, are you proposing to me in the middle of a gunfight?" Bad timing? Terrible timing. But she was smiling as she said it. Yes. They raced through the storm toward Copper Creek, Flint's men in pursuit. The church bell tower loomed ahead, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness. Reverend Hawthorne stood in the doorway with his Bible, his white hair whipping in the wind. They dismounted, at a run, splashing through puddles to reach the church steps. Behind them, the sound of pursuing horses grew louder. "Make it quick, Reverend," Jesse said, taking Maybelle's muddy hand in his. "Dearly beloved," Hawthorne began, then stopped as gunshots echoed from the street. "Perhaps we should skip to the important parts. Do you, Jesse Corbin, take Maybelle Rosewood to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do. Do you, Maybelle Rosewood, take Jesse Corbin to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do. By the power vested in me, by God and the territory of Tennessee, I now pronounce you." The church doors burst open as Flint and his men stormed inside, weapons drawn. But they stopped short when they saw the scene before them, Jesse and Maybelle, standing before the altar, her hand in his, with Reverend Hawthorne holding an open Bible. "Husband and wife," the minister finished calmly. Flint's face went purple with rage. "This changes nothing. She still owes her debts transferred to her husband upon marriage." Hutchins interrupted, stepping from behind a pew with his rifle. "Trained on Flint's men? That's territorial law, Mr. Flint. Her father's gambling debts are Sheriff Corbin's responsibility now." "Fine," Flint snarled. "Then Corbin owes me $1,500, plus interest, plus penalties. Have his badge, his property, everything he owns." "Actually," Maybelle said, stepping forward with the stolen ledger clutched against her chest, "you won't be collecting anything from anyone ever again." She opened the leather-bound book and began reading aloud. "March 15th, 1879, paid Sheriff Dunlap $50 to look the other way during cattle rustling operation. April 2nd, forged deed to Morrison property after threatening family with violence. May 20th, that's enough." Flint lunged for the ledger, but Jesse's gun stopped him cold. "Let her finish," Jesse said quietly. Maybelle continued reading the damning entries, her voice carrying clearly through the church. Each revelation sent murmurs through the growing crowd of townspeople who had gathered outside, drawn by the explosions and gunfire. Tales of bribery, extortion, fraud, and worse all, written in Flint's own meticulous handwriting. "You see," Jesse said when she finished, "turns out there was plenty of evidence of wrongdoing. You just kept it all in one convenient place." Flint's men began backing toward the door, realizing their employer was finished. But Hutchins and several armed townspeople blocked their exit. "Mordecai Flint," Jesse said formally, "I'm placing you under arrest for murder, extortion, fraud, and about a dozen other charges. I have the right to." Flint's hand moved faster than anyone expected, drawing a derringer from his vest pocket. But instead of aiming at Jesse, he pointed it at Maybelle. "You ruined everything," he screamed, his composure finally cracking. "My daughter is dead. My wife left me, and now you've destroyed the only thing I had left." The derringer cracked like thunder in the confined space of the church. Maybelle gasped and staggered backward, a red stain spreading across her wedding dress. Jesse's roar of rage echoed off the rafters as he put 3 bullets into Flint's chest. Land Baron crumpled to the floor of the church, his blood mingling with the rainwater tracked in by muddy boots. But Jesse had eyes only for his bride, who had collapsed into the front pew, her face pale as winter snow. Maybelle. He gathered her in his arms, pressing his hand against the wound in her shoulder. "Stay with me, darling. Don't you leave me." Now, her green eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with effort. Did we win?" Jesse looked at Flint's still form, then at the ledger scattered across the floor with all its incriminating secrets exposed. Through the church windows, he could see the townspeople celebrating in the street, their mortgages and debts null and void with their tormentor dead. "Yeah," he whispered, brushing rain-dampened hair from her forehead. "We won." "Good." Her smile was weak but genuine, "'cause I'd hate to think I got shot at my own wedding for nothing." Doc Pemberton pushed through the crowd, his medical bag in hand. "Move aside, Sheriff. Let me see to your wife." "Your wife." The words hit Jesse like a physical blow. In all the chaos and violence, he'd almost forgotten they were married now, legally, officially, completely. Maybelle Rosewood was now Maybelle Corbin, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. "She's going to be fine," Doc Pemberton announced, after examining the wound. "Bullet went clean through. Missed anything important. She'll have a scar, but she'll live to see her grandchildren." Jesse felt tears he hadn't realized he was shedding run down his cheeks. "You sure? Sure as I can be about anything in this life?" The old doctor smiled. "Now help me get her to my office. I need to clean that wound proper before infection sets in." As they carefully lifted Maybelle from the pew, she grabbed Jesse's shirt with her good hand. "The money from the safe," she whispered urgently. "Where is it?" Jesse looked around and spotted the scattered bills that had fallen from her dress. During the shooting, Hutchins was already gathering them up, along with the ledger's loose pages. "Right here, Mrs. Corbin," the deputy said with a grin. "All $8,000 of it?" "8,000?" Jesse blinked in surprise. Thought Virgil said there was only a few hundred in that safe. Apparently Mr. Flint had been skimming from his own business accounts. Hutchins replied, "Probably." Planning to disappear himself once he owned the whole county, Maybelle managed a weak laugh, enough to pay off every debt in Copper Creek, with plenty left over for a honeymoon. "Where would you like to go, Mrs. Corbin?" Jesse asked as they carried her toward the door. "Anywhere but here," she said, then reconsidered. "Actually, no. I want to stay right here in Copper Creek. This is our home, Jesse. Our town. Let's make it better." Outside, the storm was finally breaking. Shafts of moonlight pierced the clouds, illuminating the faces of their friends and neighbors who had gathered to witness the end of Mordecai Flint's reign of terror. Children splashed in puddles, while their parents embraced and wept with relief, as Jesse helped load his wounded bride into Doc Pemberton's wagon. He thought about the future stretching ahead of them. There would be challenges, certainly rebuilding the town, healing old wounds, starting a family of their own. First time in years, those challenges seemed like opportunities rather than obstacles. "I love you, Maybelle Corbin," he said as the wagon rolled toward the doctor's office. "I love you too, Jesse Corbin." She squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "And I promise no more breaking into houses on our anniversary." "Deal," Jesse laughed, watching the dawn break over the hills of Tennessee. "But I'm keeping that ledger as a wedding present."
Best evidence a lawman ever had.
Behind them, the church bell began to toll, not in alarm this time, but in celebration. The sound carried across the valley, proclaiming to anyone who cared to listen that justice had finally come to Copper Creek, and love had triumphed over greed. In years to come, folks would tell their children about the night Sheriff Jesse Corbin married Maybelle Rosewood in a thunderstorm, with bullets flying and the church floor covered in blood and rainwater. They'd speak of how love conquered tyranny, how courage defeated corruption, and how sometimes the only way to save what matters most is to risk everything you have. But Jesse and Maybelle never needed to hear those stories. They lived them, breathed them, bled for them, and every morning for the rest of their lives. They woke up in each other's arms knowing they had fought for their happiness and won the ledger that brought down. Mordecai Flint eventually made its way to the territorial capital, where it sparked investigations that cleaned up corruption throughout the region. The money from his safe was distributed among his victims, helping dozens of families rebuild their lives, and the bullet scar on Maybelle's shoulder. Jesse would kiss it every night before they went to sleep, a reminder that some wounds heal into something beautiful when they're tended with love. In the end, that's what love really is. Not the absence of scars, but the willingness to bear them for someone who matters more than your own safety. Jesse and Maybelle learned that lesson in a church filled with gun smoke and rain, and they never forgot it. Copper Creek thrived under Jesse's steady leadership and Maybelle's fierce compassion. They raised 5 children who grew up knowing that justice isn't always found in law books, that courage isn't the absence of fear, and that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is with a good heart, a quick draw, and someone you love watching your back. The town still stands today, a testament to the power of love over greed, of community over corruption, and of 2 people who refuse to let evil win without a fight.